I can still picture Amy back in high school, leaning over her books, talking about her dreams of helping people. We were two ambitious girls in a small, intense private school, where everyone seemed focused on making it to college and beyond. From the moment she shared her plan to study nursing, I admired her dedication. My path took me to a large state university, but Amy stayed in our hometown, working on her degree while living with her family to save money. We'd often joke about how different our college lives were: Amy at parties, her studying late nights for exams. But every time we'd catch up, I'd be reminded of how grounded she was, how sure she seemed of her future. When we graduated, I was in awe of her achievement. She'd always told me about how competitive the nursing program was, and how stressful it was to balance her classes with clinical rotations. It sounded intense, and I never doubted that she was up for the challenge. She'd tell me about the latest milestone in her studies or share snippets of the demanding residency she was in, and I'd listen, proud that my high school friend was doing something so impactful. My mom, a nurse herself, had even expressed pride, knowing how tough Amy's path was and how few people made it through the way she did. We drifted slightly after college. Life has a way of pulling you into its currents. I moved across the country for grad school and eventually settled down with a career I loved. Amy stayed in our hometown, seemingly dedicated to her work in the ICU. But even as we saw each other less, I still felt like she was one of the few people who truly understood my roots. The pride I felt for her as a nurse grew with every story she shared, especially as she started describing her experiences on the front lines during the pandemic. It was the kind of bond you carry through life even if you don't see each other every day. Then that night, when I was scrolling through the comments on a true crime story, curiosity struck. It wasn't that I doubted her, it was just one of those rabbit holes you fall into on the internet. But as I typed her name into the nursing license database and got no results, I suddenly felt like I was standing on shifting sand. It was as if the past 10 years, all the stories she'd shared, had somehow cracked open, leaving me with a growing list of questions. The search results came back blank, and for a second I thought I'd typed her name wrong. I double-checked, making sure every letter was right. Still nothing. My mind immediately started to fill with rational explanations. Maybe she'd gotten married and changed her last name without mentioning it. Though that didn't seem likely as we've traveled together, and I'd seen her name on her ID. Or maybe she'd lost her license temporarily. After all, nursing is a high-stress field and mistakes can happen. But would she really keep something like that from me? Still, it didn't add up. Amy shared so many details about her job, her stories about the ICU, the patients she'd lost, the sleepless nights she'd endured during the pandemic. None of it ever felt exaggerated. She'd always seemed so genuine, so deeply affected by the people she cared for. My mom, who's a nurse herself, even commented once that Amy's stories sounded exactly like what she'd experienced on her worst days. How could she be lying? I decided to dig a bit further, dismissing the nagging feeling that maybe I was invading her privacy. After all, I trusted her with my life stories and even my wedding. This was just a minor hiccup, a misunderstanding that I could clear up. But as I sat there looking at the empty search results, I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling creeping in. The deeper I dug, the more questions I had. It felt like looking at a painting you'd known your whole life, only to notice strange hidden brushstrokes you'd never seen before. A few years back, my mom had casually mentioned she couldn't find Amy's name in the hospital's database. She'd asked if Amy had switched jobs or gone to another facility. At the time, I shrugged it off, thinking my mom's tech skills weren't exactly up to date. She'd struggled to attach photos to emails before, so a search mishap didn't seem out of character. Plus, why would I doubt Amy? She told me herself about the prestigious residency program she got into at that very hospital. I reassured my mom that Amy was still working there and we both moved on. But now, as I stared at the empty results from the nursing database, that casual comment from my mom came rushing back. What if she hadn't made a mistake? What if there was something else she'd picked up on all those years ago, something I'd been too close to see? My mom's years of nursing experience had given her an eye for detail and a natural skepticism honed from dealing with people at their best and worst. What if her gut feeling wasn't just about a technical glitch but something far deeper? The more I thought about it, the more I started feeling that gnawing, anxious twist in my stomach. A lot of little things I'd dismissed over the years started popping up, forming a strange, unsettling picture. I had always trusted Amy implicitly, and now that trust was starting to feel shaky. I wanted to believe this was all just some weird misunderstanding, but I couldn't ignore the creeping sense that something was really, really wrong. My mom's words lingered in my mind, and I couldn't help but wonder, had she seen something I was too blind to notice? With my suspicions now impossible to shake off, I decided to dig a little deeper. I want something solid, anything to prove that this is all just a misunderstanding. So, I send Amy a quick text, keeping it casual, and ask which hospital she's working at these days. She replies almost immediately, saying she switched hospitals recently. I feel a small sense of relief, thinking maybe that's why I couldn't find her before. But part of me isn't satisfied. I try not to overthink it as I reach out to a friend, someone whose mom works at the hospital Amy claims she's at now. I keep it discreet, not wanting to risk blowing up Amy's spot if this is all just a mix-up. I tell myself it's just a little reassurance, something to ease my mind before I let this whole thing go. The response comes back a day later and my heart sinks. No one there has heard of Amy, there's no record of her as a nurse or in any other department. I sit there, phone in hand, and reread the message multiple times, hoping I've misunderstood somehow. But the words are clear. It's like the ground beneath me starts to shift. This is Amy, my friend who I've cheered on through hard days as a nurse, the one I've worried about during the pandemic, imagining her fighting through endless ICU shifts. How could all of that be fake? My head is spinning, and I feel betrayed in a way that's hard to describe. It's not just about the job, it's about the trust and connection we've had over the years. I try to remind myself that people have their reasons for bending the truth sometimes, but this is a full-blown life she's invented. And every time I think about the stress and horror stories she shared with me, it feels like another piece of the puzzle falling apart. I can't just ignore it anymore. The realization is clear. Amy has been hiding something major and I'm no longer sure who she really is. The missing graduation photos should have been an early clue, but at the time, it just hadn't seemed odd. I had no reason to doubt Amy, my high school friend who had always been dependable and honest, at least as far as I could tell. But now, looking back, I realized that I'd never seen any pictures of her in a graduation gown, or heard about a ceremony. We'd stayed close during college, but our paths were different. I'd moved away, and we'd had fewer and fewer chances to actually witness each other's day-to-day lives. With this nagging feeling, I decide to dig into the college's graduation records, hoping I'll find her listed there. I tell myself there must be some simple explanation, that maybe she just skipped the ceremony or that her name is under a different listing. But as I scroll through the lists, I feel my stomach drop. Her name isn't anywhere, not in her graduation year, not the year before or after. Amy, who I believed had walked the stage diploma in hand, isn't listed at all. It's not just unsettling, it's surreal. Memories flood back. The times we talked about college struggles, the nursing exam she said she was cramming for, the practical classes she'd vented about. Those conversations replay in my mind, suddenly ringing hollow. I think about how I'd worried for her, cheered her on, all based on stories that, if this is any indication, may never have happened. There's a strange guilt that starts to creep in. I feel foolish for taking everything at face value, for assuming without question that Amy's life was just as she described it. It's as if I've been reading a novel, only to discover the last page has been ripped out, leaving me without any real closure. As I read the bio on the dental practice's website, I'm frozen in disbelief. Amy's been working as an office manager for nearly a decade, keeping this role steady and, as far as I can tell, excelling in it. There's no mention of nursing, no trace of the ICU shifts or the pandemic trauma she described to me. It's clear, cut and dry, she's been a part of this dental office, not a hospital. I read it over and over, as if the words might magically rearrange themselves into some other explanation. It's not that I have an issue with her being an office manager. In fact, I respect it. She's held a job, worked her way up, and has a stable career that anyone would be proud of. But knowing that this solid, respectable job is the one she's hidden all this time? That's what gets me. It's as if she crafted a version of herself for me and everyone else, a version she believed was more impressive, more worthy. And the betrayal doesn't come from her job, it comes from the realization that she didn't trust me or anyone to accept her as she truly is. The more I think about it, the more questions swirl in my mind. How long has she been maintaining this facade? Does her boyfriend know? Do her family members, her other friends? I wonder if, to her, this entire story she's been telling for a decade is almost as real as the truth. But there's no denying the cold, hard evidence. Amy's been living a double life, and the nursed part of her has only ever existed in stories. It feels surreal, like discovering your best friend is a stranger. The life she portrayed to me was just a smokescreen, and behind it was a reality she somehow deemed unworthy. I'm left with an eerie feeling, wondering just how much else about her was a carefully constructed illusion. Seeing Amy's name in court records hits me like a punch to the gut. It's not just the lie about her career, it's this whole hidden struggle she's been going through alone. Debt collectors, lawsuits, things that point to years of financial stress. I try to imagine what she must have felt, facing mounting bills and a growing web of lies about her job, maybe thinking that the truth would make people see her differently. Suddenly, some past moments click into place. I remember times when she'd seemed oddly evasive about money, or when she'd make self-deprecating jokes about being broke nurse life, even though she was supposedly working a stable hospital job. Maybe I was just too quick to accept what she told me, chalking it up to the usual financial struggles we all face sometimes. Now, I wonder if those were actually hints, small cracks in her facade where she couldn't quite hold up the illusion. I start thinking back to how I may have missed signs that she was drowning in stress or felt trapped by her own story. I'm left asking myself a difficult question. Was her lie born out of desperation, an attempt to avoid judgment, or did it spiral from a smaller, easier lie that got out of hand? But as much as I want to understand, it doesn't change the fact that she made the choice to deceive me and everyone else. As I dig deeper into Amy's life, it becomes clear that her deception isn't just limited to me, it's woven into her entire social circle. I start finding old posts on Instagram from mutual friends we went to high school with, calling her our favorite nurse and jokingly asking her medical advice. There's a photo where one of our old friends tagged her and said, "Thanks for always being there with answers, even when we didn't ask. Best nurse I know." It stings to see these posts now, knowing that they believed in a version of Amy that was entirely fabricated. But the most gut-wrenching discovery comes when I stumble upon a post from Amy's mom. It's a photo from several years ago with Amy wearing an RN pin and a caption that proudly proclaims, "So proud of my nurse daughter." The post was tagged in a way that made it seem like her mom was celebrating her career. I try to make sense of it. Did Amy tell her mom that she was a nurse? Or did her mom genuinely believe in her daughter's accomplishments? I can't help but wonder, has Amy been lying to her family all along? Did they really not know the truth? I can't imagine how deep this deception must go if her parents were fully convinced she was a nurse too. This thought bothers me more than anything. It makes me question everything I thought I knew about our friendship and her relationship with her family. If Amy has been able to pull the wool over their eyes, what else has she been hiding? How does someone maintain a lie this big for this long without cracking? The scope of the lie is mind-boggling, and it leaves me feeling betrayed, not just on a personal level but for everyone who trusted her. I sit there, scrolling through posts and images, each one a reminder of the web of lies she's built around herself. And each time I come across something new, it feels like a piece of me is unraveling. The more I learn, the harder it becomes to deny. Amy isn't just living a lie, she's been living an entire false identity, and she's taken so many people down that path with her. As I dig deeper into Amy's life, it becomes clear that her deception isn't just limited to me, it's woven into her entire social circle. I start finding old posts on Instagram from mutual friends we went to high school with, calling her our favorite nurse and jokingly asking her medical advice. There's a photo where one of our old friends tagged her and said, "Thanks for always being there with answers, even when we didn't ask. Best nurse I know." It stings to see these posts now, knowing that they believed in a version of Amy that was entirely fabricated. But the most gut-wrenching discovery comes when I stumble upon a post from Amy's mom. It's a photo from several years ago with Amy wearing an RN pin and a caption that proudly proclaims, "So proud of my nurse daughter." The post was tagged in a way that made it seem like her mom was celebrating her career. I try to make sense of it. Did Amy tell her mom that she was a nurse? Or did her mom genuinely believe in her daughter's accomplishments? I can't help but wonder, has Amy been lying to her family all along? Did they really not know the truth? I can't imagine how deep this deception must go if her parents were fully convinced she was a nurse too. This thought bothers me more than anything. It makes me question everything I thought I knew about our friendship and her relationship with her family. If Amy has been able to pull the wool over their eyes, what else has she been hiding? How does someone maintain a lie this big for this long without cracking? The scope of the lie is mind-boggling, and it leaves me feeling betrayed, not just on a personal level but for everyone who trusted her. I sit there, scrolling through posts and images, each one a reminder of the web of lies she's built around herself. And each time I come across something new, it feels like a piece of me is unraveling. The more I learn, the harder it becomes to deny. Amy isn't just living a lie, she's been living an entire false identity, and she's taken so many people down that path with her. As I continue to piece together the fragments of Amy's life, I can't help but replay moments from our past. The more I think about it, the more I realize that there were red flags all along. Small things that I shrugged off at the time but now seem like signs of something much deeper. There was the time during our freshman year of college when she told me a wild story about how her family's dog had been accidentally killed, wrapped in a duffel bag and disposed of in a panic. It was one of those stories that was just a little too dramatic and over the top to sound real, but I didn't question it. I thought she was just a little extra, a bit of a storyteller. What I didn't realize at the time was that it was an urban legend, one that gets told and retold in various versions. She had likely heard it from someone else and inserted her own details, but I never caught on. Now I feel so embarrassed that I didn't see the lie for what it was. Then there were the countless little things she said over the years, casual remarks that didn't quite add up. For example, she once casually mentioned how difficult it was to balance being a nurse with maintaining a perfect personal life. At the time, I figured she was just venting about the stress of her job. But now, knowing what I do, it's all starting to feel like a carefully crafted persona. Amy never had the job she said she did, but she had somehow convinced herself, and everyone around her, that she did. Every conversation, every interaction was part of the performance. I think back to all the times I let her off the hook for not being fully transparent with me. When she would dodge questions about her career, giving vague answers or redirecting the conversation to something else. And I'd think, well, she's just private, or she's stressed and doesn't want to talk about it. There was the time I asked her about her nursing shifts, and she said something about working long hours in the ICU but always being too exhausted to talk. She said that the emotional toll of it all kept her from discussing work, but she'd still drop random nurse lingo into our conversations to make it sound real. It's all clicking now, the deflection, the vague responses, the need to constantly steer the narrative away from specifics. I let myself believe those stories because I trusted her, but now I can see that those weren't quirks or eccentricities. They were red flags. And then there was the time she told me about her plans to go back to school for business. She said she was thinking of leaving nursing because it was too much and that her new boyfriend wanted her to do something less intense. I remember thinking it was odd. Why would she want to leave a career she supposedly worked so hard to get into? But I brushed it off. Maybe she was burned out. Or maybe she just wanted a change. Now, it feels like a cover story for a life she built around something that wasn't true in the first place. All of these memories hit me like a ton of bricks, and I realize how much I've let slip by. Each time she pulled the wool over my eyes, I trusted her even more. I made excuses for her when things didn't quite add up. And now, looking back, I feel like I've been living in the dark, seeing only the version of her she wanted me to see. Every piece of the puzzle I put together now feels like it was carefully constructed, designed to keep me from ever discovering the truth. And now that I know, I feel like a fool. I can't keep this to myself any longer. It's been weeks since I made the discovery, and the weight of it is slowly suffocating me. I've reached out to my family trying to process everything. I'm looking for guidance, but it feels like everyone has a different take on what I should do next. My parents are both confused and upset. They never fully trusted Amy's story about her nursing career, especially my mom who had worked in the same hospital system. But they never suspected something this big. When I tell them what I found, they're shocked. Though as I expected, they suggest I talk to Amy first. You need to give her a chance to explain herself, my mom says. Maybe there's something you don't know. Maybe she's been dealing with something you don't understand. I know my mom means well, but I'm not sure I can trust that explanation. What's there to explain? Amy's been lying for years, and it feels like no matter how she explains it, it won't change the fact that she's fabricated this whole life. But at the same time, I can't shake the feeling that if I don't give her a chance to speak, I'll be condemning her without knowing the full story. Then there's my older brother. He's much more blunt about it. She's been lying to you for a decade, and you're still trying to make excuses for her? Cut her off. She's not your friend if she can't be honest. His words hit hard. It's true that I've invested so much into this friendship, and it's hard to accept that someone I considered close would be capable of something so deceptive. But as much as I understand where he's coming from, the thought of just cutting her out of my life feels like a betrayal to the girl I once knew, the girl I shared so many memories with. And then there are my friends. Some of them are sympathetic but say I need to confront her with compassion. If you care about her, at least give her the chance to explain herself, they suggest. Others are more skeptical. If she's lied about this, who knows what else she's hiding? You're better off without her. It's like a tug of war between two sides of my heart. The part that wants to understand and the part that wants to walk away to protect myself from any more hurt. I can't ignore it. The hurt is real. Every time I think about how long Amy has been lying, how much of her life has been a performance, it stings. I feel embarrassed too. How did I never see through it? How could I have trusted her so blindly? But there's another part of me that's worried about Amy. I don't know what's driving her to fabricate such an elaborate lie. Does she have deep insecurities? Was she hiding something from me, something she didn't think I could handle? Is she in some kind of emotional or mental health crisis? Could confronting her in the wrong way send her into a downward spiral, one she might not recover from? The truth is, I don't have all the answers. But I do know that I'm no longer content to keep pretending that everything is fine. The lie is too big and I'm too hurt. But the question remains, how do I confront her? Do I give her the opportunity to explain herself, or do I cut ties and move on? As much as I try to think logically, my emotions keep getting in the way. There's anger, so much anger, that she could deceive me for so long. But there's also sadness because I realize that the friendship I thought I had might have been built on something false. And then there's fear because I'm scared of what this could mean for the future of our relationship, if there's even any future left. Feels like a huge decision. The kind that could change everything. And yet, as much as I want to be done with it, I can't seem to let go of the idea that maybe, just maybe, I owe her one last conversation to hear her side of things. The questions are relentless, spiraling in my mind, refusing to let me find any peace. How did I not see it? I've always prided myself on being able to read people, to sense when something's off, yet with Amy I missed every red flag. It's almost like my mind created a narrative of who she was, who I wanted her to be, and I let that story overwrite any doubts I should have had. I was so sure of her, of us, that I didn't stop to question her. And now I feel like a fool. I think back to all the times she'd share details of her so-called job, how she'd talk about the hospital like she was so involved, so dedicated. She'd send me photos of scrubs or make offhand comments about saving lives, and I'd just nod along, never once thinking to ask for more proof. She didn't owe me that, I thought. She was my friend. I trusted her implicitly. But now it feels like I was wearing blinders. It's difficult to admit that I could have been so naive. I'm not a person who's easily fooled, but with Amy, it feels like I was. I remember moments when she seemed to skirt around specifics, when she avoided answering certain questions about her career. In hindsight, those moments feel so obvious. It's like she was trying to keep me at arm's length, yet I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to question her because deep down I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe in our friendship. What stings even more is that I think about all the times I defended her. I remember when she'd complain about her shift schedules or how stressed she was, and I'd be there, offering advice, supporting her, telling her how proud I was of her work. How many times did I say, "You're doing such an important job. I'm so proud of you"? Now those words feel hollow. I was feeding into the lie, comforting her for something that wasn't even real. And then there's the emotional toll this has taken on me. Every time I think about how long I've known her, I feel a mix of betrayal and heartbreak. I've always believed that I had a solid gauge for character, and yet here I am, questioning everything I knew about her. How could I have been so wrong? But the hardest part isn't just the fact that I was deceived, it's the internal struggle. The guilt I feel for not seeing it sooner, for not confronting her sooner. Why didn't I question her when things didn't add up? Was I too caught up in the comfort of our friendship? Was I so desperate to believe in her story because I wanted things to be simple? The weight of not knowing whether I missed something earlier, something crucial, haunts me. There's a part of me that's angry at myself for not being more vigilant. Maybe if I'd done a little more digging, maybe if I'd trusted my gut instead of just accepting her word, I wouldn't be in this situation now. But at the same time, I know I can't completely blame myself. She's the one who lied, the one who constructed this web of deceit. But it's hard to separate that from my own sense of failure. I keep asking myself if I could have prevented this somehow. If I'd asked her more direct questions about her career, if I'd pushed her to show me something real, anything concrete, would it have all come to light sooner? Would I have found the truth, or would I still have been swept up in the fantasy she created? The truth is, I can't undo the past. I can't change the fact that I let myself be deceived no matter how hard I try. But the one thing I can do now is learn from this. I need to remind myself that even the people closest to us can have secrets, and sometimes, the person we think we know best is the one hiding the most. It's a painful realization, but one that's forcing me to take a hard look at the way I trust others, and at how I trust myself. This whole ordeal is a lesson in humility. It's made me realize that I'm not infallible, that I can make mistakes too. But it's also given me the opportunity to grow. I have to be kinder to myself and accept that I'm not a perfect judge of character, and that's okay. What matters now is how I move forward, how I process the truth, and how I handle the next steps with Amy. It's no longer about blaming myself, it's about finding clarity in the mess and learning how to navigate this painful truth with grace. But for now, I still don't have the answers. I still don't know what to do next. All I know is that I need to stop doubting myself and take a breath. I've already been through the storm of confusion, and I need to give myself the time and space to figure out what comes next. This is the hardest part. I've spent so many years with Amy, and it feels like all of that history is teetering on the edge of a cliff. For the first time, I'm faced with the possibility that the friendship I thought was unshakable might not survive this. It's not just the lie itself that's weighing on me, it's the entire foundation of our relationship. How do I confront her without completely destroying everything? How do I navigate this without losing her forever? Part of me is terrified. I've been so loyal to her, stood by her during difficult times, and now I'm questioning everything. If I confront her, will she deny it? Will she try to deflect like she always has with uncomfortable topics? Will she just shut me out entirely, leaving me feeling even more betrayed and confused? It's like a game of emotional Russian roulette, and I have no idea what the outcome will be. But the more I think about it, the more I know that I can't just sweep this under the rug. I can't pretend everything's fine and go on supporting her false narrative. That would be a betrayal of everything I've believed in about honesty, trust, and authenticity. And frankly, it would be a betrayal of myself too. I deserve the truth just like she does. The problem is, how do I get there without causing irreparable damage? If I go into this confrontation with anger or judgment, I'll risk pushing her further away. She's clearly been living in a world of lies for a long time, and I know that confronting her in a harsh way will only make her defensive. She might double down, deny everything, or even accuse me of betraying her trust by uncovering her secret. It's a terrifying thought. But if I don't confront her head-on, I'll be lying to myself, and that's something I can't do anymore. The truth has come to light and it's out there now. There's also the lingering question of why. Why did she do this? What drove her to create such an elaborate lie? Part of me wants to ask her directly, to sit down and hear her side of the story, to understand what was going through her mind when she decided to make this deception her reality. But the deeper I dig, the more I wonder if I'll get an honest answer, or if she'll continue to hide behind the walls she's built around herself. I think about our past, the moments when we've been close. There's a part of me that wants to believe that there's some explanation, some justification that makes all of this make sense. Maybe she was trying to live up to expectations, either her own or those placed on her by others. Maybe she felt trapped in her own story and didn't know how to get out. But no matter how much I want to believe in that, I can't ignore the hurt and the deception. I can't ignore the years of trust that have now been called into question. At the same time, I don't want to be too harsh. I don't want to add to any shame or guilt she might already be feeling. I want to approach this with empathy, but it's hard to separate my hurt from my desire to understand. I know that confronting her might break something in both of us. It might change everything, our friendship, how we see each other, how we relate. The stakes feel impossibly high, and I can't help but wonder if we'll ever be able to go back to the way things were. The truth is, I don't know how our friendship will survive this. I don't know if we'll be able to repair the damage that's been done. What I do know is that this is a defining moment not just for our relationship but for me. I can no longer be complicit in the lie. I have to stand up for my own integrity, for my own sense of trust, and for the friendship I once thought was based on truth. But I also need to be prepared for the possibility that the Amy I thought I knew might not be the person I can continue to call my friend. I'm torn. I want to be there for her, but I also want to protect myself. I want to confront her with compassion, but I also need to be firm. There's no easy answer here, no clear path forward. All I can do now is face the reality of this situation, however painful it might be. It's a crisis for sure, but it's also an opportunity, a moment to determine if our friendship can be rebuilt on honesty, or if it's been irreparably damaged by years of lies. I've decided that this conversation needs to happen face to face. Texting or calling wouldn't give me the opportunity to gauge her reactions, to really see if there's any remorse, guilt, or even understanding in her eyes. I need to be able to read her body language, hear the tone in her voice, and maybe, just maybe, find a way to break through the walls she's built around herself. But before I approach her, I know I can't go in blind. I need to prepare, both mentally and emotionally, for what's ahead. This is a conversation that could change everything, and I want to make sure I handle it with care, without letting my anger or hurt overshadow what I'm trying to achieve. So, I start writing down everything I want to say. I make sure to focus on how her lie has affected me, instead of launching straight into an accusation. I don't want to corner her or make her feel like there's no room for her side of the story. But at the same time, I need to make it clear that this isn't just some small misunderstanding, it's something that's shaken my trust in her, and that's not something easily repaired. I begin by framing the conversation in terms of my own feelings. Amy, I've been thinking a lot about our friendship, and I need to talk to you about something that's been bothering me. This feels like a safer way to start, letting her know that this isn't about blame, but about how her actions have impacted me. I can already imagine her face, her eyes wide, her mouth ready to form some kind of explanation or excuse. I don't know if she'll try to justify the lie or if she'll come clean from the start. Either way, I need to be ready for anything. As I continue writing, I remind myself to keep the tone calm. The last thing I want to do is go into this conversation with all my pent-up anger, accusations spilling out like a waterfall. That would only make her defensive, and it wouldn't leave room for her to own up to her mistakes if she's willing to do that. So I focus on framing everything as my own discovery. I came across some information recently that made me question some things you've told me, and I feel like I'm in a position where I need to ask you about it directly. That line right there feels like a safe entry point. I don't want to come off as someone who's been snooping around just for the sake of confrontation. I've done this because I was hurt, because my trust was shattered. But that doesn't mean I need to start the conversation with accusations. Instead, I want to give her the opportunity to explain, to come clean if that's what she's willing to do. I also know I need to set boundaries. If this conversation becomes too one-sided, if she tries to gaslight me or deflect the truth, I have to be prepared to stand my ground. I need to let her know that I'm hurt, but I'm not just looking for an apology or an excuse. I need honesty. No more lies. If she truly values our friendship, I believe she'll have to meet me halfway. I write, I've always believed in being honest with each other, and I'm hoping that we can talk openly about what's been going on. I'm not here to attack you, but I need to understand the truth. That's what it comes down to, getting to the truth. If we can't have honesty, then what's the point of continuing a friendship built on lies? I pause and reread what I've written. It's not an easy thing to put into words, but it's the only way forward. In the end, I don't want to push her away, but I also need to protect myself. This lie, whatever her reasons were, has caused a rift in my trust. If she's truly remorseful, I need to give her the chance to rebuild that trust, even if it takes time. If she's not, then maybe this is the end of our friendship. It's terrifying to think about, but I can't keep living in the shadow of this lie. My final sentence reads, I'm ready to hear your side of the story, Amy. But I need you to be honest with me. I don't want any more secrets between us. I take a deep breath and let the weight of it all sink in. This is real. I'm about to confront her. The nerves start to set in. What if she denies everything? What if this conversation only makes things worse? But I can't let fear hold me back. I've spent too long wondering if the truth would ever come out, and now that it has, there's no turning back. I put my phone down, feeling a bit of relief. At least I've planned it out. I know what I want to say, and now I just need to summon the courage to say it. The next step is reaching out. I need to make sure the timing is right, that she's in a place where she'll be able to listen and be open to what I'm about to tell her. But before I even get there, I take one last look at my words. I'm nervous, but I'm also ready. It's time. The room feels heavy as I sit across from Amy. My heart is pounding in my chest, and I can hear the rush of blood in my ears. This is it, the moment I've been dreading, but also the moment I've been needing. The truth has been weighing on me for weeks, and now it's time to hear it straight from her. I take a deep breath and begin, my voice calm but firm. Amy, I've been looking into some things and I have to be honest with you. I found out that you're not a nurse. You never finished your nursing program, did you? For a moment, she just stares at me, her eyes wide, her lips pressed together. I can feel the tension building, thickening the air between us. She shifts in her seat, her hands fidgeting in her lap. The silence stretches out, and I wonder if she's going to try to deny it, if she's going to keep up the lie one last time. But then her shoulders slump. Her eyes drop to the floor and her voice is barely a whisper. I didn't finish. I never became a nurse. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, though I knew they were coming. Still, hearing them spoken aloud makes everything so much more real. I feel the rush of emotions, relief, confusion, anger, but more than anything I feel sadness. How could she have hidden this from me for so long? I try to keep my composure, not wanting to let the flood of emotions completely take over. Why didn't you tell me? I ask, my voice shaking just a little. We've been friends for so long and I always thought you were someone I could trust. You told me so many stories about your work, about being in the ICU. Why didn't you just tell me the truth? Amy's face crumples and I can see the shame and guilt written all over her. She looks like she's trying to gather the right words, but nothing seems to come out easily. Finally, she speaks, her voice quiet and filled with regret. I was afraid. I was afraid you'd be disappointed in me. I thought you'd look at me differently if you knew the truth. I built this whole persona around being a nurse because I thought that's what would make me someone you could be proud of. Someone worthy of your friendship. I can't believe what I'm hearing. All these years I thought I knew her, her dreams, her ambitions, the things she was passionate about. And now I'm realizing that it was all built on a lie. A lie she had to carry day after day until it became too big to keep up. I don't understand, Amy, I say, my voice faltering despite my best efforts to stay calm. Why couldn't you just be yourself? You didn't have to pretend to be someone you're not. I would have supported you no matter what. She nods, tears welling in her eyes. I know that now. But at the time I didn't feel like I could. I didn't know how to tell you or anyone. I was ashamed of myself for not finishing, for not living up to the expectations I set for myself and what I thought others expected from me. I can feel the weight of her words. For a moment, it's like I'm seeing her not as the friend I thought I knew, but as someone completely different. A person struggling with shame and insecurity, hiding behind a facade to protect herself. It's hard to reconcile this version of Amy with the one I've held on to for so long. I wish you had trusted me enough to tell me the truth, I say softly, the hurt creeping into my words. I'm not mad at you for not becoming a nurse, Amy. I'm mad at you for lying to me. You've hurt me by keeping this secret. I can't believe I've been supporting a lie for all these years. Amy's face crumples further and the tears spill over. I'm sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. I was just so scared. I thought if you knew the truth, you wouldn't want to be my friend anymore. And I couldn't bear losing you. The truth of her fear hits me hard. As much as I feel betrayed, I can also see how trapped she must have felt in her own web of lies. It's like she built this whole world around her deception, and now that it's falling apart, she's left standing there, exposed and vulnerable. Do you understand what you've done to me, Amy? I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. This isn't just about the lie. It's about trust. It's about the years of friendship I thought we had, and how everything feels like it's been tainted by this deception. I don't know if I can just move past this. She nods, wiping her eyes, her voice cracking as she speaks. I get it. And I'm so sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want you to know how deeply regretful I am. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to hurt anyone. The conversation hangs in the air, both of us sitting in the weight of what's been said. I can see the guilt and sorrow on her face, but I also feel my own conflict. I'm torn between the person I thought she was and the reality of who she's shown herself to be. This is a turning point for our friendship, and I have no idea where it's going to go from here. I take a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I need time to process all of this. This is a lot for me to handle. But I want you to know that I need honesty from you moving forward, no more lies. If we're going to rebuild our friendship, that's where we need to start. Amy nods again, looking at me with a mixture of relief and sadness. I understand. I'll do whatever it takes. I don't want to lose you. The air between us is heavy with uncertainty. We've spoken the words that needed to be said, but now the question is, where do we go from here? I don't have the answers yet, but for the first time in a long while, I feel like we're both standing in the same place, ready to face whatever comes next. The days after our confrontation feel like a fog, a mix of relief and sorrow. On the one hand, I'm glad the truth is finally out in the open, but on the other, it's hard to shake the feeling of betrayal that lingers. Amy has apologized countless times since that day, each time seeming more sincere than the last. I can tell she's wrestling with her own shame, but I can't ignore the weight of the lie she carried for so long. In the days following our conversation, we sit down to talk more about what comes next. Amy admits that she's in deeper trouble than I realized, not just financially but emotionally too. She tells me about the pressure she's been under to keep up appearances, the fear of being found out, and the shame she's carried with her. It's clear that this lie wasn't just about me, it was about her own fears, her own insecurity, and her struggle with self-worth. I don't know what to do anymore, Amy says, her voice quiet but filled with desperation. I've been lying to everyone for so long and I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to fix myself. Her vulnerability catches me off guard. As angry as I've been, as hurt as I still am, I can't help but feel compassion for her. This lie has been her crutch for so long, and now she's left with nothing but the raw truth, a truth that feels so much heavier than the lie ever did. I want to help, but I don't know how. Can our friendship survive this? I take a deep breath, gathering my thoughts before responding. Amy, I can't fix this for you. I can't take away your problems, and I don't think I'm the one who can help you get back on track. But I want you to know that I'm here for you. I'll support you if you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to face the consequences of your actions and be honest with me moving forward. But I can't be part of the lie anymore. Amy nods, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. I understand. I don't expect everything to go back to normal overnight. I know I have a lot of work to do and I have to make things right, not just with you but with everyone I've lied to. It's a difficult conversation, but it feels like a necessary one. We talk about how trust is earned, not given freely, and how rebuilding our friendship won't happen instantly. It's going to take time, patience, and a lot of effort on both sides. We discuss the importance of transparency, how we need to be open and honest, even when it's uncomfortable, even when the truth hurts. For the first time in a long while, I feel like we're on the same page. I can see that Amy is committed to making things right. She's willing to take responsibility for her actions, and she's not asking for forgiveness right away. She knows it's a process, and so do I. It's not going to be easy, but I'm willing to try if she is. The hardest part, I realize, isn't about the lie, it's about the damage to our trust. Trust is a fragile thing, and once it's broken, it takes time to rebuild. But as I sit across from Amy, watching her struggle with her own guilt and trying to find a way forward, I begin to see a glimmer of hope. Maybe this is the beginning of something new, a relationship where we're both honest, vulnerable, and real with each other, flaws and all. It's not going to be easy, and I don't know what the future holds, but I'm willing to give it a chance. Maybe this is the wake-up call we both needed to stop hiding behind facades and start being who we really are. As the days pass, we continue to talk, to rebuild. There are moments of awkwardness, of tension, and moments where I wonder if it would be easier to walk away. But every time I think about it, I remember the friendship we had, the history we shared, and the possibility of moving forward. Maybe this is a chance for both of us to heal, not just from the lie, but from the years of fear, shame, and self-doubt that led us here. I'm sorry for everything, Amy says again one night as we sit in her living room, talking about what we need to do next. I don't want to lose you, but I know I have to earn back your trust. I'm not going anywhere, I reply softly, my voice steady. But it's going to take time. And we have to be okay with that. And just like that, we start to take the first steps towards rebuilding what's been broken. It won't be easy, but at least we're starting from a place of honesty now. The lie may have torn us apart, but maybe, just maybe, it can also be the thing that brings us back together. It's checkout time, and I'm already up to my neck in work. The lobby is buzzing with activity. Phones are ringing off the hook, guests are swarming the front desk with questions, and everyone seems to think their issue is the most urgent thing in the world. From room keys that just stopped working for no reason to billing questions that require a degree in accounting, I feel like I'm juggling a dozen balls while walking a tightrope. As each call comes in, I'm trying to sound calm and cheerful, but internally, I'm just praying for a few quiet seconds to catch my breath. I have a cup of coffee that's gone cold at my side and a granola bar that I started nibbling on hours ago, now sadly forgotten on my desk. Forget about actually sitting down for a real breakfast or even getting a sip of hot coffee. It's days like these that make me wonder why I chose hospitality as a career, but then again, what's a front desk job without the non-stop chaos? Guests are checking out one after another, and everyone has a question, a comment, or a complaint. Someone in the line wants extra towels for their next stay, even though they're leaving in 10 minutes. Another person is wondering why they were charged twice for a minibar item, while someone else is trying to book a room for next month and insists on personally going through every single amenity we offer. My computer's churning through reservation after reservation, and I'm fielding questions on everything from the best local breakfast spots to why the hot tub isn't open at 6 a.m. The lobby clock ticks mercilessly, each second reminding me that I'm already behind on everything. It's only 10:30 a.m. and I'm exhausted. But hey, this is the easy part of the day, right? Just another morning as a front desk agent, balancing a smile and a "how can I help you?" with the knowledge that in this job, there's no such thing as a slow moment. Amid the swirling storm of checkout madness, a guy approaches the desk looking mildly annoyed but calm enough. He's not in a hurry like most of the other guests, so I brace myself for something more than just a quick question. Sure enough, he clears his throat and asks, "When does breakfast end?" I barely have time to register the question before I respond, almost on autopilot at this point. Breakfast ended at 9:30. I give him a polite, practiced smile as I mention that it's already 11 a.m., and just to make things crystal clear, I add that the breakfast room is currently closed and being cleaned. Honestly, I think that should do it. It's a solid, straightforward answer, right? Most people would nod, maybe look a little disappointed and move on. But not this guy. I can see him processing my answer, but instead of nodding and saying thanks, he stands there looking from me to the closed breakfast room door, like he's trying to find a loophole or perhaps hoping that my words will magically change. I watch as his eyes narrow, like he's decided that breakfast rules don't apply to him. It's almost like he's contemplating the consequences of just walking in there anyway, but I'm still hopeful that he'll just grab a coffee and be on his way. So I gently reiterate, "They're in there cleaning now, but we have coffee in the lobby if you'd like that." But he's still hesitating, staring at the door as if maybe, just maybe, I'll suddenly change my mind and let him in. I can practically feel the gears turning in his head as he decides his next move. I try to stay patient and keep that customer service smile plastered on my face, but a part of me is already prepared for him to ignore what I just said and make a run for the scrambled eggs and cold muffins that the housekeeper's probably tossing right now. Breakfast ended an hour and a half ago. And yet, here we are locked in an unspoken standoff over the breakfast room door. It's just another surreal moment in a front desk agent's life, a job where you quickly learn that people will test every boundary, even those involving a cold, picked-over breakfast that's already seen the end of its day. The moment stretches as he stands there, still staring at the breakfast room door. I'm hopeful he'll finally accept defeat, maybe head to the coffee station or go back upstairs to check on his family, but then he makes his move. Without so much as a glance in my direction, he pivots and strides purposefully toward the breakfast room, the same room I just told him is off limits. I watch, a mix of disbelief and mild amusement bubbling up. Did he really just ignore me? Is he actually going for it? For a brief second, I consider letting him walk right in and realize his mistake firsthand, but I quickly shake off the thought. I know my housekeeper is in there, hard at work and with absolutely zero interest in playing breakfast police. She doesn't speak English, which means the poor woman would likely be caught in a confusing confrontation that she didn't sign up for. That's not fair to her, and I know it's on me to stop him before he makes her day more complicated. Sir? I call out, putting just a touch of firmness in my voice. He pauses, looking back with an expression that's halfway between innocent surprise and a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Breakfast ended at 9:30, and the room is closed for cleaning, I remind him as clearly as possible. For a second, I wonder if he's going to play dumb, pretend he didn't hear me the first time, or argue some obscure reason why he absolutely needs access to that room. But he pauses, looking like he's weighing his options, and finally, slowly, he turns back toward the front desk. As he walks back, I brace myself for some kind of excuse or maybe even an apology. But instead, he just gives me a look, one that's both defiant and mildly annoyed, as if I've personally sabotaged his plans for an 11 a.m. breakfast. I hold his gaze, maintaining that friendly but firm front desk smile, hoping he'll realize I'm not about to budge. Part of me can't help but wonder what he's thinking. Did he expect that if he walked in confidently enough, no one would stop him? Did he think I was exaggerating about breakfast being over, or that if he ignored the rules they'd somehow bend in his favor? It's always a bit fascinating to see guests approach rules as if they're negotiable, especially when the only thing waiting for him in that room is a housekeeper and the ghost of breakfast past. At this point, I'm ready for him to finally give up and head toward the coffee station like everyone else. But I can sense that we're only just beginning. He's got that look in his eye, the one that says he's not finished with this situation just yet. This breakfast battle is far from over, and I'm preparing myself for whatever argument he's about to throw my way next. He walks back to the desk, annoyance clearly simmering beneath his polite facade. I brace myself, keeping my tone as calm and professional as possible. Sir, as I mentioned, breakfast ended at 9:30, and the room is now closed for cleaning. I've said it at least twice now, and I can see in his eyes that he knows I'm not bending the rules today. But that's when he decides it's time to escalate things. He shifts his tone from annoyed to pitiful, wearing an expression I've seen a dozen times before, the look of someone about to launch into its special circumstances speech. He sighs as though summoning the emotional weight of what he's about to say, and then begins, "My family just got in last night. We had a really late arrival, you know? Ah, there it is, the sob story. I know this game. It's the classic, my situation is unique and therefore I should get an exception." I watch him, nodding politely, though I'm already mentally running through the list of guests who arrived late last night and somehow managed to get up early enough for breakfast. But of course I don't say that. Instead, I wait, letting him spin his tale uninterrupted. They're still upstairs, sleeping. We were all so exhausted, you know? He pauses, perhaps hoping I'll crack, nod sympathetically, or best-case scenario, usher him right into the breakfast room with a heartfelt, "Of course, sir, go right ahead." But I keep my expression neutral, not giving him an inch. I can see he's watching for a reaction, so I stay calm and wait for him to continue. "Could you please just extend us the courtesy of a quick breakfast?" He looks at me with pleading eyes, like I'm the gatekeeper to some vital, life-sustaining meal. There's something almost theatrical about it, as if he's expecting this last-minute emotional appeal to melt away the hotel's policies. I give him a polite, understanding nod and reiterate, "I understand, sir. I really do." But unfortunately, breakfast ended an hour and a half ago, and the room is closed for cleaning. I keep my voice steady, friendly but firm. The rules are the rules, and I know better than to let one exception slide just because someone pulls out a late-night travel story. For a second, I see him falter, like he's realizing that the sob story didn't have the effect he'd hoped. But he recovers quickly, and I can tell he's not ready to give up just yet. He leans in a little as though trying to create some bond between us, but I stay where I am, holding my ground. It's like a silent standoff over scrambled eggs and toast. A ridiculous battle of wills over a meal that ended hours ago. I know he thinks he's being persuasive, but I've seen too many versions of this act to be swayed. The show continues, but I can already tell. He's grasping at straws, hoping for a crack in my resolve that just isn't there. At this point, I've laid out the situation as clearly as possible. Breakfast officially ended an hour and a half ago, and the room is now closed and being cleaned. I remind him, with all the patience I can muster, that we simply can't extend the breakfast service beyond its end time, especially not this late in the day. He stares at me, clearly disgruntled, his hopeful expression fading into a look of mild frustration. I can see he's weighing his options, perhaps trying to think of one last way to get around the rules, but I stay firm. After a few moments of grumbling under his breath, he sighs dramatically and gives a small nod as if to say, "Fine, you win." Relieved, I watch him finally turn and step away from the desk. I think we're done here. I'm already shifting my attention back to the other guests in line, hoping to salvage a bit of time before the next wave of checkouts hits. But just as I'm about to mentally move on, I notice he hasn't actually left the lobby. Instead, he's lingering by the coffee station, his eyes flicking back to me now and then in a way that suggests he's not quite ready to give up. He's pouring himself a coffee, but it feels more like a performance than a simple caffeine run. I watch out of the corner of my eye as he grabs a cup, fills it, and stirs it slowly, making a point of looking over at me, perhaps to see if I'll soften up or reconsider my stance. It's like he's staging a last stand at the coffee station, subtly reminding me of his presence, as if he thinks a little persistence might wear me down. Then, almost as if on cue, he pulls out his phone and starts a loud, casual conversation, his voice carrying across the lobby. "Yeah, we didn't even want hotel breakfast anyway," he says with exaggerated nonchalance. "You know how it is, dining out is way better." He glances my way, clearly hoping I'm listening, his tone full of theatrical indifference. I have to fight a laugh, wondering if he's trying to save face or just sulking over his unsuccessful attempt. I keep my poker face intact, nodding to the next guest in line and focusing on my work. Let him grumble. The breakfast room might be closed, but his performance? Apparently that's still going strong. He lingers by the coffee station, taking his time as if he has nowhere else to be. I can tell he's still stewing over our interaction, and his eyes keep flicking toward me in the way of someone who's definitely not ready to let something go. I'm keeping an eye on him too, just in case he tries another breakfast room sneak attack. It's like a silent duel of side-eye, neither of us fully committing to leaving the moment alone. Then, just when I think he's finally about to head off with his coffee, he whips out his phone, holds it up to his ear, and launches into a conversation with all the volume and drama of someone on stage. "Yeah, we didn't even want hotel breakfast," he says, his voice carrying clear across the lobby. "You know how it is. Hotel breakfast is so basic. Dining out is way better anyway." I almost lose it then and there. The way he's talking, anyone would think he's a refined connoisseur who's above the usual hotel buffet. The irony that he just tried every trick in the book to get into that very same breakfast room seems completely lost on him. It's like he's rewriting the narrative in real time, trying to reclaim some dignity after the failed attempt. And I have to admit, his strategy to save face is so over the top that it's almost impressive. As he goes on about how he's really not that into hotel food, I catch myself biting back a smile, trying to keep my expression as neutral as possible. He keeps glancing over, maybe hoping to catch a look of regret or second thoughts on my face. But I'm just barely holding in laughter at this point, nodding politely to another guest, pretending not to hear his very public declaration. The whole performance feels like a kid loudly declaring they didn't want dessert anyway after being told they've had enough. Watching him make such a show of it somehow makes the whole encounter feel even more absurd. I know he's just trying to convince himself that he's okay with the outcome, but his attempt at cool indifference is anything but subtle. Finally, after what feels like an eternity of exaggerated coffee sipping and dramatic phone chatter, he tosses me one last lingering look as if to say this isn't over. But I know it is. The breakfast is over and this little episode is over, even if he's not quite ready to accept it. Just as I think I might have a moment to breathe, another guest approaches the desk with a look of expectation and a clipboard's worth of requests, if not literally, then definitely in spirit. He's here to check in early, a good 2 hours before the usual check-in time. I give him a polite smile and prepare myself for what's coming, hoping maybe he'll just need a key and be on his way. But no, this guy is coming in with demands. Without so much as a greeting, he launches into a list of specific requirements, delivered in a tone that suggests they're non-negotiable. I need 2 rooms, he says, and they need to be side by side on the first floor. He pauses, giving me a look that says he's expecting an immediate yes, as though I'll magically conjure the perfect setup from thin air. I nod and offer my best customer service smile, the one I've practiced in front of the mirror for situations just like this. Of course, sir. I'll check our available options, I tell him, keeping my tone as friendly as possible. I start tapping away on the computer, but I already know we were busy last night and that housekeeping is still making its way through the rooms. It's a classic case of high demand and limited supply. But still, I try to make it work. After a moment, I look up and explain, it looks like we do have rooms available for early check-in, but unfortunately, I can't guarantee they'll be side by side or on the first floor right now. Housekeeping is still preparing some of those rooms. I keep my voice calm, professional, hoping he'll understand that we're doing what we can given the circumstances. But instead of taking a moment to consider, he lets out a huff of frustration. I don't see why that's a problem, he says, as if the idea of housekeeping needing time to clean rooms is an outrageous inconvenience. Can't you just make it happen? He's giving me the look. That look that says he believes my only purpose in life at this moment is to rearrange the entire hotel setup just for him. I suggest, as tactfully as I can, that if it's essential for his rooms to be side by side on the first floor, he might want to come back at the regular check-in time when more rooms will likely be ready. I brace myself for his response, already sensing he won't like it. He crosses his arms, giving me a stare that could probably melt concrete. He's not taking this well and he's not shy about showing it. After a few moments of back and forth, where he tries to convince me that surely there's something I can do, he finally sighs and decides to proceed with checking in anyway. But then, as if he's come up with a new master plan, he adds, "All right, but can you move one of the rooms next to the other after 3 p.m. when it becomes available?" I take a deep breath and explain as kindly as possible that moving to another room after he's already checked in would count as booking an additional room, and that would mean paying for a third. I watch him process this information, clearly unhappy with the answer, but realizing there's not much else he can do. He opens his mouth to argue, but then he stops. He seems to grasp that I'm not bending on this point either. 2 rooms means 2 rooms, and if he wants a third, he'll have to pay. After a moment, he finally nods, seemingly resigned to the reality of the situation. I'm surprised, and maybe a little impressed, that he actually understood and didn't push it any further. But as he heads off, I can't help but wonder if this won't somehow come back around later. I break the news to him as gently as I can. At this moment, there are no side-by-side rooms on the first floor available. With a sympathetic smile, I suggest he could check back a little later, once more rooms have been cleaned and readied by housekeeping. It's a fair and practical solution, or so I thought. But apparently the idea of waiting is an affront to him. He frowns, crossing his arms and planting himself firmly in front of the desk as though standing his ground will somehow make rooms magically appear. "Are you telling me there's no way you can put us in side-by-side rooms on the first floor?" he demands, disbelief coloring his tone. The words hang in the air like a challenge and I brace myself, knowing we're about to enter the debate phase of this interaction. I explain the situation again, keeping my tone as calm and friendly as possible. "Sir, we had a full house last night and rooms are being turned over as quickly as possible, but at the moment the rooms you're requesting aren't available. If it's important to have them next to each other, I would recommend waiting until check-in time when more rooms should be ready." He sighs loudly, shaking his head, clearly unsatisfied with this answer. It's as if I just told him I've run out of his favorite dessert instead of politely informing him about the reality of room availability. He looks at me expectantly, as if hoping I'll suddenly reveal that I was hiding the perfect setup all along. But there's no magic wand to wave here, and I can tell he's not going to let this go easily. "Look, we've got a lot of bags and it'll be a hassle if we're not on the first floor and next to each other," he says, trying a new angle. I nod sympathetically, acknowledging his inconvenience, but I gently remind him that early check-in is subject to availability, and right now, this is what we have. Realizing he's not getting his way, he switches tactics. "Fine, I'll check in now, but can I request one room to be moved next to the other once it becomes available on the first floor?" Here we go again. I take a deep breath, summoning every ounce of patience I have left. "If you'd like to switch rooms later, we could arrange that," I explain, "but just a heads up, it would count as booking an additional room, so you'd need to pay for that third room." I watch his expression carefully, wondering if this will finally bring the discussion to a close. His eyes narrow as he processes this, and for a second, I can tell he's considering whether it's worth another argument. But to my surprise, he simply sighs and nods, perhaps realizing that pushing further isn't going to change the outcome. "All right, fine," he mutters, clearly not thrilled but finally accepting defeat. He picks up his key cards and turns to leave, throwing a final look of mild exasperation over his shoulder. Part of me expects him to circle back with another request or argument, but he heads toward the hallway, resigned to his fate, at least for now. As he disappears around the corner, I feel a wave of relief, hoping that this is the last I'll see of him for the day. But in the back of my mind, I know there's always a chance he'll come back, hoping for yet another miracle. At long last, he agrees to check into the available rooms, seemingly resigned. I'm breathing a small sigh of relief, ready to move on to the next guest in line, when he comes up with a new scheme. He says he'll take the rooms now but wants to switch one later on, just temporarily, when a neighboring room becomes available. I can almost see the wheels turning in his mind, planning how he'll arrange his setup without paying for that extra convenience. Politely but firmly, I explain, "If you'd like to move one of the rooms later to be next door, we can arrange that, but just so you know, it would be billed as an additional third room." I choose my words carefully, spelling out that it's not as simple as swapping rooms around and avoiding the extra charge. 2 rooms for the price of 1 isn't something we offer, and I'm pretty sure he knows it, but that won't stop him from trying. He raises an eyebrow, looking at me like I've just revealed an unfortunate secret he wasn't supposed to know. "A third room?" he repeats, testing the words out as if he's hoping I'll rethink it if he just gives me the right look. But when I remain silent, holding my ground, he seems to accept that this plan won't be as easy as he hoped. He lets out a long sigh, shoulders slumping slightly in defeat before nodding. "I get it," he finally mutters, though he still seems to think I've denied him some grand right to rearrange the entire floor plan for his convenience. He picks up his key cards and holds them a bit tighter than necessary, giving me a final look of reluctant understanding. After a moment, he turns and heads toward the elevator, but not without a last sidelong glance, as though he's making sure I won't change my mind last minute. As he disappears around the corner, I can't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. It's not often that entitled guests actually accept a firm no without spiraling into an even bigger argument. It's a small win, but in a job where small wins can feel like huge victories, I'll take it. With any luck, he's settled for good now, and I won't see him trying to lobby for an extra room swap later. With him out of sight, I take a breath, ready to move on to the next inevitable adventure in the lineup of guests who still need something. As the last of the paperwork gets filed, and the system chimes with the confirmation that both guests are officially checked in with their special requests noted, of course, I finally allow myself a deep breath. It's a small victory, but it feels like a triumph after the whirlwind of entitlements I've just navigated. The lobby is still buzzing with activity, but for the moment it's quieter, more manageable, and I finally get a chance to check in with the other duties I've been neglecting all day, like answering emails and making sure my coworkers aren't drowning in their own messes. I glance at the clock. It's still early and I know the afternoon rush will hit soon. There are always a few more guests trickling in after lunch, each with their own requests, complaints, or surprise demands. But right now I can at least take a small mental break, something that feels rare in this fast-paced world of hospitality. The day isn't over, but for now I've survived the worst of it. The entitled guests, at least the ones I've dealt with today, have been handled. I didn't cave in to the breakfast demands or room-switching schemes. I stayed calm, professional, and firm, navigating the delicate balance between providing great service and not letting guests walk all over me. I guess that's what they don't tell you when you're starting out in this line of work. That sometimes, you have to be the one to set boundaries, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. As I sit back in my chair, my mind drifts to the small moments of absurdity from the day. The guy grumbling about the breakfast he didn't even want, but tried to bargain for anyway. The man's outrage over not getting rooms side by side on the first floor, despite the fact that we're doing our best to accommodate everyone. It's almost laughable in retrospect, like something straight out of a sitcom. And I'll probably tell these stories to my coworkers later when we're winding down after our shifts, all of us exchanging the ridiculous situations we faced that day. It's our little way of coping with the madness. But then I hear the familiar sound of the lobby door opening, and a new guest steps in with a question or request. It's never really over, is it? Just when you think the day is winding down, there's always another story waiting to unfold. And so, the cycle continues. It's a strange job, one that tests your patience, problem-solving skills, and ability to stay cool under pressure. But at the end of the day, despite the entitlement and the constant demands, there's something rewarding about it too. Helping guests feel heard and making their stay as comfortable as possible is part of the gig, even if that means dealing with some eye-roll-worthy moments along the way. So, I pick up the phone to answer the next question, mentally preparing for whatever new demand comes my way. It's another day in the life of hospitality, full of the unexpected, the unreasonable, and the stories we'll laugh about later.